Welcome to this second episode of a webinar series presented by Perspective Brussels and the PlanningMatters platform on non-Atlantic. We are now recording the episode and you will be able to watch it later on the YouTube channel of Perspective Brussels. We will also share the slides to all the people who are connected today after the webinar. So as I keep repeating since we started, please mute your microphones while you're not speaking. We will give you the floor to ask your questions directly to the speakers later on. And you can also use the chat to ask your questions directly, including those for the speakers. We can take a few after the presentation. So my name is Cécile Huppert. I will be your host today, together with my colleague Nicolas Demoy, who is sitting here next to me. We both work for Perspective Brussels, which is the Brussels Capital Region Planning Agency, and we are also coordinators of the PlanningMatters platform. We have a tight agenda today, compact agenda, with two interesting presentations. So I will quickly give you some contextual information about PlanningMatters before we dive into the content. PlanningMatters. It's the unique European platform for exchanges and discussions between urban planners, urban planning agencies, and departments from European cities. Its goal is to bring them together to cooperate and exchange at the European level, build common messages on the European stage, and promote the role of urban planning in Europe. We used the opportunity offered by the Belgian presidency of the EU in 2024 to strengthen contacts between European urban planning agencies and create an exchange of ideas on their professions and their roles in meeting global urban challenges. After the presidency in 2024, we decided to continue the dialogue and exchange of knowledge, to continue to share our expertise and to engage more strongly with European institutions on the role and place of urban planning in European urban policies and initiatives. And so we do this with our partners in the PlanningMatters platform. All interested agencies, urban development departments of cities and regions also, metropolitan areas, urban networks, they are of course welcome to join us by signing a letter of commitment. So if you are interested to know more and join us officially, do not hesitate to ask after. The idea of this series is to discuss non-Atlantic and the different strategies to achieve it. We are running the series until June with one episode a month, and today it's episode 2. First, last month we had the first episode, and this episode gave us an overview of what is non-Atlantic and the different approaches that different European countries use to achieve this goal. We had our speaker, Nicolas Rossignol from the ESPON program, who presented the content of a report that was published in 2024, Non-Atlantic Trajectories, Policies and Practices Across Europe. This report explains the different options that are available to achieve the non-Atlantic objective and also details some challenges influencing the implementation of non-Atlantic. If you want to know more about what was discussed in details, I invite you to go on our YouTube channel. You can replay the video. But today we will talk about compact cities as a model for urban planning and how this strategy, urban densification in other words, can contribute to the objective of non-Atlantic. Densification, it's often perceived as negative, as having a negative impact on the quality of life in cities, even though it's also an essential lever for preventing urban sprawl, meeting the demand for housing, and improving our living spaces. But we still need to densify with reason and tact, and we will see today with Helsinki and Berlin how they intend to or manage to optimize the use of urban space while preserving the quality of life of their residents. But okay, enough of this suspense now. Let me introduce our first speaker for today. So Heikki Salmikivi is the head of the Spatial Planning Unit at the Helsinki City Environment Division. He's also the head of the Helsinki Region Land Use Planning Group. And his unit is responsible for the City of Helsinki Strategic Urban Planning, which is also called the Helsinki, no, it's also responsible for the Helsinki City Plan and other master plan. Don't hesitate to type your question to Heikki. During his presentation, we will also have time, hopefully, to take 1 or 2 questions after the presentation. So Eiki, the floor is yours. And here is your presentation.
Thank you, Cecile. Thank you for the excellent introduction. My presentation is approximately 15 minutes, and I will briefly talk about Helsinki strategies of growth, handling growth, and what are have been our targets in developing Helsinki, and I also talk a little bit about the nature preservation program that we have been working on in the city of Helsinki. But if we go on, I'll briefly tell what Helsinki is in a nutshell. We're a Nordic capital of Finland. The long winter is finally coming to an end, and we're also seeing the springtime here in Helsinki. And in many international comparisons, Helsinki has been ranked relatively highly in the past 10-15 years among other Nordic capitals and many other European cities. You can put it forward. We have been, or the Finland has been ranked as the happiest country in the world for 6 or 7 years in the running, and we seem to be the happiest city in the world as well, which we of course take great pride into. Next, then if we look about the population of Helsinki, you can see that for a relatively long time Helsinki was a smallish town. It was founded already in 1550, but for centuries it remained a very small outpost on the northern shore of the Baltic Sea, and we've seen the major increase in the city actually as late as in the late 20th century. At the moment, the region, Helsinki capital region, is approximately 1.5 million inhabitants, of which Helsinki is roughly a bit less than half. The city is growing fast. The region is growing by 15,000 to 20,000 inhabitants a year, so there is quite a lot of growth that we're trying to incorporate. Next. The city structure of Helsinki, the inner city that we have, is mostly built in the 19th and the 20th century, where we have original long time standing tram network, dense urban blocks. But we're also expanding the city at the moment on the existing or the former harbor areas right next to the inner city, which you can see on this building, where we're building dense transit-oriented development. Here you can see high-rise development where we have a tram, light rail line, metro station, highway, shopping center, all incorporated in this big transit-oriented development area in Helsinki. Next, Helsinki is also known for the architecture, and we just recently finalized a renovation of the Finlandia Hall, which is one of Alvar Aalto landmarks in Helsinki. And the next picture shows you the new central library, Oodi, which is one of our big new architectural landmarks. So I invite you all to come here for architecture excursion, or then just a weekend with the family. It's a great location, and you can also come and swim in front of the Helsinki City Hall, which you can see in the next picture. But the next slide shows you the overall city structure of Helsinki, where we have relatively dense inner city of approximately only a couple 100,000 people, but mostly the capital region of Helsinki is extremely green. We have a lot of green spaces. We have green corridors that run from the sea to the countryside, and then a lot of blocks of flats in suburban setting, and also semi-detached housing and detached housing. Our strategy in Helsinki for 20 years has been mainly focusing on the expansion of the inner city to a former harbor areas that you can see on the next picture. The policy of Helsinki, long-term policy of Helsinki, has been to develop socially sustainable neighborhoods. So these new maritime areas right next to the inner city are not just for the rich. We have state subsidized housing, owner-occupied housing, rental housing, student housing, and we're trying to have a mix of neighborhoods, mix of different kind of housing and different kind of people in all the blocks in these areas, so that we have a socially sustainable city where everyone can enjoy the urban amenities offered by the city and the archipelago. If the past 20 years that we've been working on has been in the expanding the inner city to these harbor areas, what our current focus in urban development was formed in the city plan 2016, which you can see in the next slide, where we had 5 major sort of targets or goals. First of which is the expansion of the inner city, but this time further out along the motorway corridors that run into the inner city. The second point is creating a public transport network city. We have good metro, train, tram, bus system in Helsinki, but in the city plan 2016 we introduced new light rail network, which consists of transversal light rails, but also light rails that come straight into the inner city of Helsinki. We're also developing important nodes. We talk about developing sub-centers in real city central areas, so doing transit-oriented design and also improving the green network city that we have. Helsinki's goal is to be carbon neutral by 2030, which is a big challenge. Next slide shows you the transforming urban structure that we're aiming for. So our target is to expand the inner city all along to the Ring Road 1, which is surrounding the inner city area, and also creating a network of public transit where you can always access different locations without coming necessarily to the inner city. So the next slide shows the development that's ongoing at the moment. We have large development areas which are actually extremely good on the no-net land take perspective, because these are areas where we can actually increase the amount of green spaces. These are former harbor areas which are being just asphalt and concrete, and here we can develop new big green spaces for all the citizens to enjoy. But the future development is in the next slide, which shows you the expansion of the inner city further along the existing highway network of Helsinki. So the big challenge that we're facing is how to transform the motorways into city streets. There's the next slide, which shows the 7 big highways that are coming towards the inner city, and our target is to transform them into urban boulevards. 3 of them are in the planning at the moment, and we're starting to build them in the coming years. Next slide is just to show you the idea of the light rail network that we're trying to develop. And while we're building these light rails, these are also sort of core of the future development of Helsinki. So we aim to have a lot of housing right next to the light rail, where people can access different locations of the city super easily. One examples that we're currently building is on the next slide, the Crown Bridges project, which is actually the longest bridge in Finland. It's now under construction, which will be finalized next year. And it's only reserved for light rail, trams, and pedestrians. And that's a bridge that connects the eastern former oil harbor area to the inner city of Helsinki, which you can access then by tram in only 8 minutes. But what this means is we're also having to sort of sacrifice some of the green spaces that we now have. Those are areas that are next to the highway, so they're not really usable for the recreational purposes, and people don't really enjoy them, but we are for sure losing some sort of areas that are green at the moment. On one hand, we can create new green spaces by developing the brownfield areas, but our big target is also to make sure that 10% of the all land of Helsinki, both the sort of land and the sea, would be like strictly protected by law by 2038. So we have come up with a really ambitious plan, the Helsinki Nature Protection Program, where we have 98 terrestrial sites, which are 1,200 hectares, and then 22 maritime areas with 4,500 hectares. And in these areas, if we can sort of make them as nature preservation areas, then we would have 10% of both terrestrial and maritime area of the Helsinki strictly protected by law. So that's a big challenge, but we are really focused on achieving that. It's now has been endorsed by the Public or Urban Environment Committee, and it's pending in the city board. So I'll conclude with one slide which tells that what we are doing. We're a plan-led city, and we believe in planning. We've been doing long-term strategic planning for 30, 40 years, while expanding the inner city and focusing the development on the light rail. We are creating transit-oriented, developing and growing inwards and up, which then reduces the urban sprawl regionally. We're a major landowner. More than 60% of the land within Helsinki is owned by the city, and we get annual land rents of approximately 300 million euros every year that we can invest in the light rail and also services in the city. And I conclude with the fact that we're trying to be zero carbon city by 2030, and it's a big challenge, but we're sure we can reach that goal. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Heikki. As we have quite a tight schedule today, I would like to ask you to keep your questions for maybe at the end of the webinar. It'll be probably easier. On our side, we have a quick question regarding the Helsinki's development and the attractiveness of living in dense urban centers. So Helsinki is quite a young city, not so dense. And young people are actually eager to live in dense urban environments rather than in the suburbs. So do you think we can envisage other models than densification to cater to the housing needs of inhabitants? I'm thinking of the opposition between qualitative habitat in existing buildings and new construction. How do you sell that story?
Well, if we look at the sort of housing price development in Helsinki, we can clearly see that the demand of urban amenities and good services has been really big in the last 20 years. So look at the housing prices. The pricing prices close to the inner city, where we have the services, where we have the densest city, the prices have been gone up by, let's say, 300%, whereas in in some more less dense areas or areas further away, the housing prices haven't gone up that much. So there is if we make a study in Helsinki that in what kind of dwellings and what kind of urban environments people would like to live, we clearly get answer that there are more people that would actually want to have be able to live in the dense urban settings in comparison that we actually have of these kind of areas in Helsinki.
Thank you, Tessie.
Thanks a lot. I suggest we go now to the second presentation of the day with speakers from Berlin, who will tell us about a specific project they have been working on in Kreuzberg, which is a neighborhood east of Berlin. It's a transformation of a former flower market, Blumengroßmarkt, and the transformation of this former flower market into a lively area, more socially diverse as well, with some shared spaces for interaction, different uses for the different spaces, and new building typology. We selected this project because we thought it was an exemplary idea of what the compact city could be. To explain to you what is this project, we have together with us a nice duo. So we have Bernard Heitele, who is head of the Architecture, Urban Design and Competitions Department at the Berlin Senate Department for Urban Development, Building and Housing. And we also have Benita Braun-Feldweg, who is the co-founder of BF Studio Architekten and one of the responsible planners and architects of the project. And her expertise lies in urban living projects with a keen focus on public space dialogue. So here is the presentation. Bernard and Benita, the floor is yours.
Yeah, dear Cecile, thank you very much for introducing Benita and me. And especially thank you for the invitation to present a project from Berlin as part of today's webinar. At the beginning, I will try to outline the urban context and some framework conditions. And afterwards, Benita, as one of the developers and architects, will explain you the process of the project and its implementation. Next slide, please. This slide shows an aerial view of Berlin from 1989, highlighting the Berlin Wall's former border fortification in yellow. These fortifications divided East Berlin, northeast of the wall, and West Berlin, southwest of the wall. The wholesale flower market, outlined with a dotted line, is located, as you said, in Kreuzberg, part of southern Friedrichstadt, Friedrich City. Friedrichstadt, with its 17th century Baroque grid layout, extends south to the circular Mehringplatz. Historically, this area was central, but during Berlin's division, it became a periphery on the edge of West Berlin. This led to social housing projects, predominantly inhabited by disadvantaged communities with high migrant populations. Next, please. The aerial view from 2010 shows the hall of the wholesale flower market with 13,000 square meters surrounded by social housing, a school, green spaces, and the Jewish Museum, a key cultural landmark in the zigzag form designed by Daniel Liebeskind. The market's relocation created the opportunity to transform the site into a lively urban space. The area contains social housing built during International Building Exhibition, IBA 1987, and cultural institutions. The presence of diverse uses, such as residential buildings and the Jewish Museum, reflects the complexity of the surrounding neighborhood, which includes low-income households and security requirements due to the museum. Next, please. In 2009, Berlin-based office BBZL developed an urban design concept on behalf of the Jewish Museum. aiming to integrate its expansion into the neighborhood's development. The project emphasized creating shared spaces for social interaction, mixed uses, and diverse building types to transform the social housing neighborhood into a more socially diverse area. The Flower Market Hall would serve as the museum's extension, integrated into a sequence of public squares and green spaces. New buildings that align with the Baroque building of the Jewish Museum across the street framed the existing hall. Workshops from 2009 to 2011 shaped a conceptual framework to involve Berlin's creative community without causing gentrification or displacement. Next, please. For 3 of the 5 plots, a concept-based bidding process prioritized quality over price for land allocation. The procedure evaluated proposals based on predefined criteria and encouraged creative solutions for the site. This innovative process added value to the project by promoting elaborated urban development and became a key factor for its success. So far from me for the introduction. Now it's my pleasure to give the floor to Benita so that she can give you an insight into the implementation of this complex project.
So next, please. Thank you very much. So I'm pleasure to be in this discourse. The redevelopment of this area was only possible through specific common policies, which had been established by the Senate of Berlin, the district of Kreuzberg, and quite important private stakeholders. Next, please. The context of the city and the district you already got in the slides before, but it's still really important to know. We are today in the geographical center of Berlin, so 5 minutes away from Checkpoint Charlie, but still it has been on the edge of West Berlin, and you still can feel the situation till today. On one side, we have this cultural highlights like the Jewish Museum. We have a lot of tourists every day, but there are a lot of social gaps remaining. The district is quite diverse. We have 70% non-Germans, and we have very difficult social tensions in this area, and it's home to disparate ethnic groups. And the starting point of the redevelopment was to create a new public space, as you can see here, to foster this idea of a creative neighborhood through interdisciplinary collaboration and inclusive planning. Next, please. So the most important instrument, and actually is the crucial important instrument, is a sustainable land policy, which had been taken place in 2011. This was the first concept awarding procedure in Berlin. And in this dimension, it remains still the only one. It really is a shift in real estate policy and strategy, because before the public land was only sold to the highest bidding price. So this was a new approach in order to consider a framework of a new art and creative quarter. With the premise, concept outbids money, the criterion for allocating the site was 40% based on purchase price and 60% on the proposed use concept. Next, please. So we were lucky, 3 projects, the yellow marked one, IBEP and Fritz 23. These are organized as Baugruppen, building groups, and the Metropolitan House, the one I'm representing, is a social-oriented property developer. We were successful in the tender procedure with the individual use concepts. And all the representative of the 3 site buildings, we collaborate in a formal association in a group, so-called project group, PXB, in order to maintain or to achieve a sustainable urban development and a cooperative planning process. Next, please. So the first real task we have to fulfill, we concluded a so-called site development contract, and all the 3 projects invested together 90,000 euros for informal participatory urban co-production projects. We organized a park festival, a flea market. We initiated temporary projects, developed creative workshops with a local elementary school. And of course, we provided information through the whole planning process. The key focus was to gain social acceptance as a socially sustainable aspect and to integrate the new building before they started to be built. We had collaborated in a joint committee to choose the different projects we somehow submitted together with district representative. Next, please. And in the beginning, we had been asked, every site has to work for a qualifying planning process. We could somehow achieve that we established a so-called qualifying planning procedure. And at the end, it was a kind of workshop procedure with an advisory board, consists of authorities, external architects, and local residents, and could achieve qualifying recommendations for urban development, architecture, and ground floor spaces. Next, please. So in this way, the transformation of the ex-flower market area is a project which really received multiple awards for its architectural design quality and urban development. And the success lies in this opportunity for a network planning process between the public sector and the private developers and the cooperative innovative procedures. That means the concept awarding procedure, the site development contract, and a qualifying planning procedure. So to really bring together the top-down and bottom-up process in a different way to activate all the resources of the city we do have. Next, please. In these times, it's quite important to identify commons. What are the commons for the people, for a city, for society, and to set up a governance to relate the social and the spatial resources of a neighborhood. Next, please. The Metropolitan House, which I'm responsible for as an architect, as a developer, and a curator at the same time, we could convince with the use concept of the active ground floor space, which took advantage of this big square situated between the Jewish Museum and the Academy of the Jewish Museum. The Metropolitan House provides 7,000 square meters as a mixed-use building with hybrid typologies, flats, maisonettes, offices, studios, and ateliers, and, quite important, the active ground floor spaces. And there is an economical model of the ground floors which relies on contractual obligation to ensure its active use. Next, please. The 1,000 square meters active ground floor interacts with public space. It intermediates with the private space, and it's even connected to a private garden, which also hosts semi-public projects in the summertime. Facing the square, there are a restaurant, a bakery, a bistro, and 40% of the ground floor are open maker spaces. Little stores extend the existing retail along the street. Its economical model is supported by the tenants co-financing the spaces on various degrees based on the floor location. So from the first floor to the top floor, all of them totally finance the investment of the ground floor. Next, please. The 40% of the ground floor, the 400 square meters maker spaces, are available on a short term for diverse initiatives, groups, associated partners to carry out their project. These spaces are offered at a limited rent with an annual average of not more than €6 per square meters on a binding period for 10 years, following up as again a cross-financing model. Next, please. And there's a need and an obligation again for a curated ground floor governance and management. Only this management of the maker space was possible by establishing Feld 5 Association as a non-profit organization to create the site-based cultural platform Feld 5, which is open to the neighborhood to initiate, to promote and to link art, design, architecture, and everyday life. These open maker spaces, we consider them as a free space, a laboratory, a stage always accessible to everybody and on a temporary base. And this commercial model is financially supported by the owners of the ground floor spaces, covering staff costs up to 60,000 euros per year for 15 years. So that means in this way you will have founded a 1.5 full-time equivalent position to manage the space. Next, please. So for us, the public space as the very important resource for social governance is the crucial question for densifying the city. We need to have public space, but nowadays the public space is not anymore given as something which is there. You need to consider now that you do have so many people from different cultures. You have the gaps in the social status, facing the whole multiple crises. You must go beyond the traditional urban models. So not one single approach is enough. We must stimulate and activate public spaces. So the idea regarding and established as well with the financial models to activate ground floor spaces are quite important to stimulate the social resources of a neighborhood. But this requires long-term governance and management, and again, based on a solid economical structure. This involves integrating private investment, encouraging voluntary work, and operating with a framework of public common policies, balancing allowing and doing to foster inclusive development. So far, thank you very much. Next, please.
Thank you so much, both of you, Bernard and Benita. Like I said earlier, we will take some questions. We have some at the end of the program. Just a quick question from our part, and it really is regarding this great-looking project in terms of governance and co-construction, I would say. So Berlin has a very specific history and process of urban development and a strong culture of participation among residents, as we can see. So this project, the Blumengroßmarkt, is rather exemplary of a culture of collaboration between public interest, real estate market, and local people that is typical of Berlin. So, of course, you already answered a few of these questions I'm going to ask you now, but what are your recommendations to make density desirable, even more than the things you showed us? Does it really require a cultural shift in the way people live?
You mean it's a cultural shift in the way that we live together in a city, in a densified area? Yes, I think that's the matter. And if you foresee in the future, the city will be our home in the future. I mean, also relating to infrastructure, to climate issues, and so on. In this way, so many people and so many issues are getting together, and all the issues of politics, of religion, of parallel situations coming across. And coming across means to think about public space in order to organize public space as a living thing. And we have the globalization, we have the digitalization, the trading is not working anymore. So the economical bases are changing. So anyway, a compact city really needs to consider the mechanism of how to run a city in public space.
Yeah, thank you. I see Bernard is raising his hand as well.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, maybe adding to Benita's, I think it's not just about densification, but of course it's also about mixing and integration. And I think this project shows that very good, that it's also a big challenge for the future societies in our capitals, in our cities, that you also integrate the different groups. When you make the city more compact, it's also about these topics, and they are not easy. And especially in this case, there are some conflicts, of course, as you can imagine, between the population and, for example, the institution of a Jewish museum. But that's the task. And so the densification is also the integration and mixing, I guess.
Okay, thank you, Cecile.
I don't see any questions. There is one from Pierre. Do you want to ask it because it's related to the project in Berlin? So maybe now that we have our speakers here, you can maybe ask your questions.
Okay, so we have a question from Pierre Lemaire. So concerning the Berlin project, it's not clear to me whether a public body has also participated in the financing of the works.
Yeah, the public body was involved by giving the land, not for the highest price, but with this model of giving it for the best concept. Yeah, that is what I wanted to show in this slide with the land allocation by quality. So this is how the land is involved.
Thank you. And a question for Heikki regarding strategic planning and urban planning. How is it integrated for the city of Helsinki? How often do you update your strategy, or is it an ongoing process? And what are the mechanisms for strategies to translate into urban planning? Heikki.
Thank you for the excellent question. The city plan in Helsinki is traditionally made every 10 to 15 years, but we're also making an implementation plan of the city plan. We're reviewing it every 4 years, always after the city strategy. We review and analyze the city strategy, and then we make alterations to the development process in accordance to the city strategy. The strategic planning and detailed planning are all in the same urban environment division. We are in the 6th floor at the strategic planning, and then the detailed planners are at the 5th floor. So they're right underneath our feet all the time, figuratively speaking, of course. So in Helsinki, all the strategic planning, the transportation planning, and detailed planning are all integrated, and we're working in multidisciplinary teams all the time. So there is a really, really tight connection between all the 3 aspects.
Okay, thank you so much. We have the time for the last question, Cécile.
Mm-hmm.
So regarding the project in Berlin, sorry, I'm going up again. So the framework in Berlin, in which all the users of the Metropolitan House contribute to financing and active ground floor. Was it difficult to make this happen and find a developing party willing to cooperate with this?
It was difficult. It's still difficult because it's an ongoing process. If you look at governance issues, needs to be invested every year new, and the society is facing more and more crisis. Because I mean, since we had been finished in 2018, the world has changed very much. We had a pandemic, we have now war, we have this Middle East conflict. We are living in an area where a lot of people are from Middle East living in this area. So it's a real strong issue, not to build the building, but to keep working this matter of integration and to bridge between all the groups we do have in this our society. But we had been lucky to have the profit of the low interest period before. In this way, we could really find tenants to co-finance the idea of the ground floor idea. And I think this was a very successful moment we could get.
Okay, thank you. And just to wrap up the question time here. So I guess it's really to Metropolitan House again. Concerning the financing of the open use ground floors, is it the case that the owners of the upper stories have financed the construction and management of these open use ground floors?
Yes.
Okay.
Because otherwise it would not be possible to get any loan from any bank in the world. If you have 40% with this rent capture, not to really make this possible.
Okay, thank you so much for the questions. Very practical questions, sometimes very precise questions from the participants, and thank you to the speakers who took the time to answer those. Before we conclude, we also wanted to give the floor to Ivana Katowic, who has been committed by the European Urban Initiative Programme to work on a future theme for the urban agenda for the EU. Maybe you know, some of you, what the urban agenda for the EU is. And this new theme is actually compact city. So very interesting for us today. Ivana, why is this topic of compact cities relevant for cities also in the current EU context? And what do you take of the presentations and discussion of today for your own work as part of the urban agenda for the EU?
Well, Cecile, many thanks for inviting me, and I think it was extremely helpful also for my ex-ante evaluation and for the general public really to hear of these great examples. So, compact city is really important topic today because we all know that it is about the environmental protection, but also it is about the financial effects of the urban sprawl that basically public sector is taking at the very end. So what is the key of the discussion about the compact cities is the discussion about the trade-offs. So there is no urban model or urban plan that is perfect. So there are always trade-offs. And also when we implement a compact city model, we need to have in mind that so far, in the literature analyzing the implementation of the compact cities, there are always a certain trade-offs, such as the rise of the housing prices, the loss of the green areas, and so on. And this is why I think it was really, really good and important to hear this presentation. So, for example, in the case of Helsinki, we saw that the specific attention was really to make a long-term model which is working hand in hand with other policies that are developed in the area. So we are seeing the new areas in which they're paying special attention to the housing mix, meaning that there is an introduction of a different typologies, but also there is a specific care on the social structure of the area, meaning that there is a housing for all, not just really high-end expensive housings on the waterfront that we have as an example in many cities that were developing densification policies with the negative long-term consequences on the social sustainability. And another topic that I think was really excellent here was this specific outlook on the fact that in some cases they're going to lose existing green areas. The quality of these green areas is of course not really high because they are close to the highway. However, they still have important functions. There is no soil sealing, there is the diversification of the areas and so on. And that there is this really comprehensive plan. So another policy that is a sectorial policy, but going hand in hand with urban planning policy about the targets for the green areas and the ways in which you are going to compensate for this loss, and even more to build very ambitious targets for green and blue protected areas for the overall area of Helsinki. And I think that this is something that we need to have in mind as a planners. So working really cross-sectorial in the sense that there are interventions in the other fields of policy in order to make this compact city work. And concerning the Berlin case, what I find really important and for us planners, something that is quite good, and I liked the let's say angle of the presentation, that you were focused on the processes and on the types of the association, the public contract, this shift that the once when you are in the process of selling a public land or giving a lease to the public land, that there is a possibility to make a qualitative approach, looking at the quality of the project and looking on the ways in which how to cooperate. Because in the many planning systems in Europe, we can see this divide between the private intervention and the public interventions, and the possibility really to work with the private intervention in order to make a higher quality of the produced area is great. And I really liked this notion that answering to the questions that we are not speaking about densification but about mixing and integration, because basically we are not speaking about urban form per se, we are speaking about sustainable urban planning, and this is a subchapter of the compact city topic of the urban agenda, meaning that we have really to be careful to mitigate the trade-offs in order to produce really good plans and good consequences, good policies for our cities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ivana, for summarizing so well the discussion and the presentation today, and also highlighting already the key points and the challenges or the things to keep in mind when we densify. Actually, it's not just about urban planning; it's very transversal in the end. So we are reaching the end of today's session. So thank you all very much for being with us today for the second episode of the Planning Matters program. And big thanks to all our speakers. It was very interesting presentation today. We will be back next month for another episode, the third episode of our series, this time focusing on greening strategies to prevent land take, and also the preservation of green open spaces in dense urban environments. We will have examples from Turin and also from Brussels. We will share today's presentations with all the participants. You will also find the recording on our YouTube channel. And you can already register if you're interested to attend the third episode of the webinar using the link on the slide or the link I will share now in the chat. You have it. Thanks a lot for sharing your time with us.
Thank you so much.
Take care and have a nice rest of the day. Goodbye, everybody.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.